A new battlefront in the war against terror begins. Judea and Samaria has now become the center of focus. The IDF is transferring large forces to Judea and Samaria amidst concerns of an increase in terrorist activity there, as the Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi, held a situation assessment in which he declared that the IDF is preparing for a major operation in the coming days. The attitude in the General Staff is that the time for mowing the grass is over, and instead it's time to turn over the soil in Judea and Samaria, starting right now. The new policy is based in part on the assessment that with terrorists being released from prison and returning to these areas, along with an increase in attempts by Iran to smuggle weapons into the area, there is an increased threat of attacks. Active combat has stopped in Lebanon and Gaza for now, and the IDF has the ability to concentrate forces on the new threat, which is also an old threat. The root causes of the problem need to be addressed, as can be seen in the celebrations that took place in several Palestinian cities and villages at the news of the release of the security prisoners from Israel. These demonstrations feature residents waving Hamas and Hezbollah flags and chanting, "We want El-Qassam," and, of course, Allahu Akbar. The IDF and the Palestinian Authority tried to stop these celebratory demonstrations, but they happened anyway. Meanwhile, in Gaza, Hamas made some noises about not releasing more hostages and then relented, declaring that some more female hostages will be released on Sabbath, Saturday. But they like to taunt Israel, and it's come to light that the massive crowds that we saw in the video tormenting the hostages as they were transferred to the Red Cross was just theatrics. In reality, the transfer was deliberately made in a closed-off area with a relatively small number of people crowding around so that Hamas could make a movie that looked like their armed guards were holding back a huge mob. The Palestinians are the only group of people in the world who can claim to have suffered a genocide one day and then the next day declare a great military victory, and everyone takes them seriously. Meanwhile, Hezbollah is also threatening to resume the war against Israel when the ceasefire expires on January 26th. However, there are quiet contacts being made with the new Lebanese government, and signs of hope are emerging on Israel's northern border. Further afield, the Houthis are claiming they plan to send hundreds of thousands of fighters to Israel, but I guess they never got around to it. In any case, they are continuing to threaten Israel with horrendous consequences if the ceasefire in Gaza does not hold. Finally, we send our congratulations to the new United States President, Mr. Donald J. Trump, hours after his inauguration. President Trump delivered a speech in which he hosted on stage some of the freed Israeli hostages alongside representatives of the families. To the family members of Omer Natura, who passed away, he was killed on October 7th, he said, "This should never have happened." We have a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what is happening in Israel on the 473rd day of the war with Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, and all the Shiite militias in Iraq. All of them are taking their orders from the Revolutionary Guards Corps in Iran, which is the head of the axis of evil in the Middle East. A moment before we start, I'd like to invite you to click the subscribe button so you stay tuned to the truth and never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. A major security operation in Judea and Samaria is brewing, and the IDF is deploying large forces to this area, and today we are recording from the Gush Etzion junction south of Jerusalem in Judea and Samaria. Yesterday, an IDF force carried out a sweep operation of arrests and searches in the village of Tamun in northern Samaria. This is part of the IDF's friction policy towards Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad in this region as they attempt to establish their infrastructure in Judea and Samaria to compensate for the devastating defeat that they suffered in the Gaza Strip. However, this policy does not come without cost, and overnight on Sunday, a soldier from Battalion 8211 was killed in action where the vehicle that he was riding in was hit by an improvised explosive device in the Tamun area of the Menashe region. It is important to point out that the battalion that these soldiers were part of is one of 20 battalions that are currently deployed to this region, and many of the reserve soldiers in these units have been mobilized in the reserves for at least 250 days since October 7th, and this is the third time these units have operated in this sector, which is adjacent to the city of Jenin. The Palestinian Authority police have also been active in Jenin over recent days, battling the terrorist groups and the criminal gangs who have effectively taken control of the streets. This incident is also a case in point for why the IDF says the greatest danger in the upcoming campaign is coming from IEDs, explosive devices. Speaking of IDF statements, Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi held a situation assessment on Monday evening in which he declared that alongside the heightened readiness in defense in the Gaza Strip, we must be prepared for significant operations in Judea and Samaria in the coming days to get ahead and catch the terrorists before they reach our citizens. However, the operation may have already begun, and forces from the IDF and the border police were rushed to the Fonduk area on Monday afternoon following reports of disturbances. And this is just one of many hotspots that have flared up in the last 24 hours. The proximate cause of all these flare-ups is the release of terrorists held in Israeli prisons as part of the ceasefire deal in the Gaza Strip. This prompted street demonstrations in several cities and villages, some of which escalated into violent demonstrations against Israel and the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority did their best to try and keep these demonstrations from starting in the first place and to try and contain them once they did begin already. But things quickly spiraled out of control. As the white buses carrying the released prisoners made their way to the villages where their families lived, the streets quickly filled with people. Some of them set up fireworks, waved the flags of Hamas and Hezbollah, chanted slogans glorifying jihad and violence against Jews, and in some cases even climbed up on the vans, making it difficult for them to move. The released prisoners, who finally managed to find their families in the crowd, hugged them to the cheers of the crowd, while some also spoke to the media. In Jerusalem, released terrorists Roz Hawais, who was arrested after carrying out a stabbing attack in May, said, "They've treated us like animals. There wasn't good food or medical care either." Even if we take this person's testimony at face value, which I don't think we should, it raises the question of how someone who attacked elderly people and children with a knife deserves to be treated in prison. I invite you to share your comments about this in the comment section below. I really like to hear what you think about this. Getting back to the celebrations, they didn't last for long as the Palestinian Authority police and the IDF moved aggressively to settle people down and restore order. This started even before the release of the terrorists, with warnings to their families and others against disruptions. However, this was just the first phase of the deal, and there are several more releases of hostages and terrorist prisoners ahead of us. The IDF and the Palestinian Authority police are preparing for the possibility that future rounds of releases will result in even bigger disruptions and demonstrations, and planning accordingly in the IDF and the security establishment. In addition, the security forces are planning to deal with the increasing threat level, as many of these terrorists are returning to parts of Judea and Samaria and even East Jerusalem neighborhoods, where the assessment is that a very different situation exists post-October 7, 2023. IDF Central Command recently received several units that were divided amongst the various regional brigades, and in light of Hamas's desire to carry out attacks, the IDF has deployed throughout Judea and Samaria, creating checkpoints and barriers on roads for Palestinian vehicles. Those vehicles will be inspected before traveling on roads shared by Israelis and Palestinians in an attempt to thwart the next shooting attack. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development along Israel's largest border and in the territories of Judea and Samaria, and we also work hard to bring you first-hand content every day. So we need your support so we can continue bringing you the truth. So please subscribe to this YouTube channel, TBN Israel, if you haven't already. Share our videos and follow us on social media. And if you want to do more than that, any contribution will help us continue to spread the truth. So please donate to us via the donate button here on YouTube, or go to tbnisrael.com/give. So every dollar will be invested in what's happening in Israel. Now, shifting our focus to the Gaza Strip, where the ceasefire is underway and Hamas is making a big show of still being very much in control. Reports in media portals from the United Arab Emirates, including documentation of Gazan Palestinians returning to the ruins of their homes, and the extensive humanitarian efforts being made by Emirati charities, shows the political role the UAE plans to play in Gaza's future rehabilitation. The scale of destruction in the cities of the Gaza Strip is beyond anything from previous rounds of conflict, and residents are beginning to realize that the war that Hamas started on October 7th has left them in a much worse condition than what they had before. In addition to destroyed buildings and infrastructure, there are reports of enormous piles of untreated waste and garbage laying around, raising concerns about outbreaks of diseases. International humanitarian organizations who operate in the Gaza Strip are speaking in apocalyptic terms about the needs that they have for equipment and supplies to even begin the process of cleaning up these mess, caring for all the wounded and injured people, and restoring basic services. An advisor to the Palestinian Authority President Abu Mazen commented on this matter, saying, "Hamas has failed." Here at Boots on the Ground, we often ask you to pray for various things, and I would like to take this opportunity and ask you to pray for the ordinary residents of Gaza who are struggling, suffering because of the results of this war that Hamas started. And speaking of Hamas, a spokesperson for the terrorist organization made an announcement late Monday evening giving a date for the next group of hostages to be transferred, setting a date different from the one previously agreed upon. In response, Israeli pressure was applied, and ultimately Hamas backtracked from this announcement, clarifying that the pre-agreed date would be kept and the next part of the deal will be carried out this coming Sunday, while in Israel it was clarified that the deal would be carried out on Saturday. This is the second time that Hamas has violated this agreement, after last Saturday the terror organization delayed submitting the list of female hostages to be released, claiming due to a technical glitch. In response, Israel froze the ceasefire until the list was handed over. In a related story, we all saw the images from the mass of Gazans surrounding the hostages, the vehicles that were transporting them in a show of force that looked scary. In the video, you can see many hundreds of Gaza Strip's residents gathering around the designated meeting point for the hostages transfer. And according to field documentation, Red Cross vehicles were already deployed there, waiting for the process to begin under the ceasefire plan. But a wide-angle shot of the area taken from a drone shows that it was all a big theatrical show, as the vehicles were deliberately placed in an enclosed area and the crowds weren't even that big. They were just jammed into this small area so that they can make a movie that would project the image they wanted to project. This is typical of the lies and deceit that Hamas uses to manipulate public opinion in Western countries and amongst its own population. Another example is the way that Hamas didn't hesitate for a moment and rushed to declare victory even before Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu approved there was an agreement at all. The losses it suffered, including the annihilation of its leadership, the destruction of the streets, none of these confused the terrorist organization's propaganda wind. It is the only population in the world that can claim genocide and victory at the same time. And the goal is clear: solidifying Palestinian consensus and continuing to cement Hamas's control of the Gaza Strip. The gunmen who appeared there amidst the shouts of joy as soon as the ceasefire began are proof of that. And still, after the irony, here is an important reminder of the cognitive warfare taking place alongside the physical conflict. The possibility that guns will fall silent in the coming weeks does not necessarily herald its weakening. On the contrary, in the absence of fighting in the real world, the lies and deceit are only going to intensify. In Hamas's message to its own population, it will be hard to compete. If, at this stage, the Palestinians still haven't realized that their actions led them to disaster, no Israeli awareness campaign will succeed in doing so. But the Palestinian public is not Israel's main target audience here. Preceding them is the international public, which has forgotten why Israel is fighting in the first place and that it has yet to achieve victory, which needs a reminder of the brutality of the enemy it faces. We must understand that our national trauma will not begin to heal until the last hostage returns home. In that sense, the hostage deal is not only a source of joy and hope and concern for many, it's also an opportunity to provide the world with a bit more context. This includes the publication of information regarding the massive increase in trucks filled with humanitarian aid being sent into the Gaza Strip, which Israel is allowing despite concerns that Hamas is stealing most of the aid, keeping the best parts for themselves and selling the rest to Gazans' long-suffering residents so they'll have money to buy more weapons and ammunition to attack Israel again in the future. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development in the Gaza arena. Now, we switch our focus to the northern arena, where Hezbollah is preparing for the continuation of the ceasefire in Lebanon, threatening that if Israel does not withdraw by January 26th, it will bring about the collapse of the agreement and even blow up the United Nations role in the deal. Lebanese Member of Parliament from Hezbollah, Ali Fayyad, says that the terrorist organization is watching January 26th, the day on which, according to the agreement, Israel is supposed to fully withdraw from the Lebanese land, and warned that if Israel does not withdraw, it will lead to the collapse of the implementation mechanisms of this agreement. Fayyad further threatened that if Israel violates the agreement, it will lead to an explosion of the United Nations role in sponsoring the agreement, which will place Lebanon at a new stage in its military and political calculations. In a speech he delivered in Nabatea in southern Lebanon, Fayyad emphasized that the responsibility of expelling Israel from Lebanese territory is a shared responsibility of the government, the army, the people, and the parties in Lebanon. Fayyad clarified that Hezbollah will handle and confront any Israeli presence in Lebanese territory if the agreement is breached, and stressed the need for the international community to fulfill its promises to Lebanon. Israel is not alarmed by these threats, but also the voices within Lebanon are changing. With less than a week until the end of the ceasefire in the north, the criticism against Hezbollah in Lebanon continues, precisely from the direction of its former political partners. The Christian politician Jebran Basil, who leads the Free Patriotic Movement, came out against the terrorist organization's decision to go to war with Israel in recent days, and he's not the only one. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development on our northern border. Please continue to spread the truth, share, and follow us. And now, let's move on to what happened yesterday in the United States of America. United States President Donald Trump spoke on Tuesday at the Capital One Arena in Washington, just hours after his renewed inauguration as president. Before he began his speech, former hostages Noah Argamani and Shushan Haran and families from hostages wearing yellow scarves around their necks took to the stage. Argamani, who became an advocate for the hostages after her rescue, stood by Trump throughout the speech, with his envoy for hostage affairs, Steve Witkoff, on his right hand. In the speech, Trump announced a series of significant decisions, including revoking the sanctions that the Biden administration had imposed on Israeli settlers on the grounds that they undermined peace in the region. He also expressed optimism about Saudi Arabia joining the Abraham Accords, and he addressed the situation in Gaza, saying that most of Hamas's previous leaders have died and in any case did not manage it very well. He also signed a withdrawal order from the World Health Organization and made a significant statement on the war in Ukraine, saying that Ukrainian President Zelensky wants a peace agreement while Russia's President Putin is destroying Russia's economy by refusing to reach an agreement. Speaking of the Israeli hostages and the broader issue of the war in Gaza, Trump declared, "We have won, and now the work begins. We must bring them home." To the former hostages who are with us here today, welcome home. Speaking of Romi Gonen, Doron Steinbacher, and Emily Damari, who were released on Sunday, he said, "The three young women who returned home yesterday were harmed. One of them lost several fingers while she tried to protect herself from gunfire. Can you believe that? Shameful. We never stopped praying for you, and we are so happy that you were reunited with your friends and families. May God bless you all." The president also spoke about the hostages still held by Hamas, addressing the parents of the hostage Omer Natura. "Some families say, 'My son will never return, but please bring back his body.' This should never have happened." Later, while signing his first presidential orders, Trump once again referred to the hostage deal, expressing doubt about completing all the three stages. He said that this is Israel's war, not America's, and he's not sure how it will end, but he added that Hamas has been very weakened. Trump's Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, is considering a visit to the Gaza Strip as part of his efforts to preserve the ceasefire and hostage release agreement between Israel and Hamas. It was also reported that given the low level of trust Trump's team has in the feasibility of the agreement between Israel and Hamas, Witkoff intends to demonstrate an increased presence in the area over the coming weeks and months in order to personally address the complexities that will emerge. Recently, he said that we have to remember there are many extremists and fanatics, not only on the Hamas side, but also from the right wing on the Israeli sides, who have a complete incentive to blow up this entire deal. Please follow us and spread the truth. Continue to pray for Israel. Let's pray for the safety of our hostages who are held in terrible hands of Hamas terrorist organizations in the Gaza Strip, in tunnels somewhere underground. Pray for the safety of the IDF soldiers wherever they are, if they're fighting in the Gaza Strip, in Lebanon, in Syria, or in Judea and Samaria. Pray for the peace of the people of Israel, and most importantly, never forget to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and together we will win this war because God is on our side.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.